let's get down to the core subject for today's talk. I don't think it's any secret. I don't think anybody that's in the audience needs any convincing on that this is a thing. Let's dive in. What do you think are some of the factors that lead Black women to burnout and to neglecting their own mental and physical well-being? What do you think goes into this equation?
Sure. I mean, I think there's a macro issue, like at a societal level. And then I think there's also kind of within the Black community. So I'll start at the macro. I mean, I think it's just slavery, right? Blame it all on slavery. But really, I think it goes back to there being these demands on Black women historically to maintain work and family and community without necessarily taking care of themselves or even being able to slow down to take care of themselves. And I think over time that's been passed down as something in the community that we've taken pride in. So there's a intra kind of Black community dynamic where we take pride in being the leaders in our homes and our communities. And so there's kind of a pride that comes along with it. So it can be what I use the term self-inflicted, because we're like, this is great. Like, we all feel good about this. Other people applaud us for doing it. We applaud ourselves. We applaud each other. So it doesn't immediately stand out as a problem. Now it comes from being put in those positions. Like, I think we didn't choose that, but because we were put in this role, we have grown into it and take pride in it. So I think that it's kind of both.
That's a really good point. You know, you're exactly right in that it doesn't have to be spoken about in certain ways. And so we just don't. We talk about it in terms of like, oh yeah, I'm being real productive, or I'm meeting all of these things. And I feel like, especially, you know, I can come at this from a woman perspective, but knowing some of the hurdles and stuff that I've had to deal with from my place of relative, very good, privilege and resourceness. Then you add in the additional intersectionalities or additional hurdles that people are going to have to face because they exist in the world as a Black woman or a woman of color. You know, it really is, it's layers upon layers, right? And you're right. You get to this point where, well, you can't change it. The system is the way it is. So if you're going to have to be faced with all these challenges, it is preferable sometimes to be like, well, I did it, you know, and make it an accomplishment. But that doesn't mean that the accomplishment is not damaging to you as well. And I feel like that's something that's really hard for people to get through their heads. You know, yes, there's all of these demands put on you by society, by your family, by your group around you, your community, but it's what we're doing to ourselves about it, and really saying, like, really continuously beating into our own heads. Well, it doesn't matter. This is what you have to do to get by. This is what we have to do.
And I think that's part of the reason why, you know, a lot of people ask me, and it's funny, like, well, why just Black women? And it's precisely for the reason that you said. Fundamentally, I think all working women deal with this. I mean, any woman that is in corporate America, in any kind of like just working period, that has any kind of familial responsibility, and even if they don't, there's still these unspoken expectations. But the reason that I focus on Black women is, to your point, there is an intersectional issue, and it does compound the problem. And so the reason I focus on Black women is if I don't highlight that, there are some things that get lost in the discussion. Mm-hmm. So I can have the conversation all day long about women, and it generally will apply, but there are these nuances, particularly the taking pride in being like the leaders and the empowered people in our community. You know, the Black community in many ways is matriarchal, and mm-hmm. that's due to like force, but over time you own it. That, I think, is unique to the Black community in the United States. So we have to look at it through that lens, because it can be even harder to identify it in yourself, right?
Oh,
because
yeah.
You're applauding yourself, everyone else is applauding you, and you may not even be self-aware the harm that you're experiencing, because it's just accepted and expected that you behave that way.
And it's like, it's almost seen as like a binary, right? Like, if you're not succeeding in spite of, if you're not accomplishing these things, then you're a victim, or you're not good enough, or you're not whatever. And those things are, generally speaking, not at all true either.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's, yeah. Okay. So let's talk about how this feeds into Superwoman syndrome. Now, is this something that we're describing just in terms of the Black community, or are we going to look at this as a wider? Doesn't matter to me. I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So the way that I generally talk about it is the Black Superwoman, but Superwoman syndrome was coined like in the early 80s, and it wasn't specific to Black women. It was really talking about, there was a doctor, Dr. Gentry, that came up with this. And, you know, we had feminism, we had women come into the workforce. And then at some point there was this like, well, wait a minute. Now we've got women in the workforce and they're succeeding and doing great things. And they're still doing all the things in their household, and they're still doing all the things in the community. So then at some point it's like, oh, we just added stuff. Like we just added more things. And the idea of the Superwoman just generally is the expectation that we do it, like that we do it, and we do it to perfection also. That the real, you know, the real title is when you are leading your home perfectly. If you're a husband, a wife, or you have a spouse, you're doing that perfectly. If you're a parent, you're doing that perfectly. If you are a leader in the community, you're perfect. If you're in your workplace, you're perfect. So it's not just, okay, we're getting by. It's, like we are excelling in every space. And the Superwoman part is about saving too, right? So it's also about, if you're thinking about kids or you're thinking about the community, you might be on boards. You may be helping, women who have been impacted by domestic violence or human trafficking. So there are these things that are very noble. So it's not like, none of the stuff that we're doing is wrong, and none of it is anything that anyone would ever notice is a problem, because it's just all this goodness that's coming out of us. Except,
well, like, what are people
person.
supposed to say? Like, oh, your kid's hair is always done perfectly for school every day. Your husband is you're never late for anything. You always have everything prepared, blah, blah. Like, and let's also consider this, y'all, in light of the Black tax, which is an absolutely real thing. So we're talking about people that are already being considered at a lower set point and will already have to overachieve to get the same recognition as their coworkers, probably white people like myself, who do not have to go through that bullshit, and they shouldn't have to go through it either. So you are,
and then you come on top of it.
Yeah,
right.
Like we're not even like Superwoman. We're talking like Amazon level of like, you're not just a superpower, you're like a god. Like there is seriously so much achievement and so much like being accomplished that not only is not being properly recognized, but is also still harmful to that person.
Right. And the irony, and when I started talking about this coming out of my career, it's not that there's not a lot of discussion around it. Like it as harmful as it is, there's not a lot of discussion, particularly if the women are still doing well. Like if they haven't hit the wall yet, or if they haven't gotten to the point where they're not functioning. So they may still be doing all these things. And so my position is, and it's still harmful. And I want to have the conversation and get people to start thinking about it, because my goal is that no woman, Black, white, Asian, has to hit a wall and slide down the wall by the time that they realize, hey, I've given everything, and the one that I haven't given to is myself. Because that's the big gaping hole in all of this, is there's very little of that achievement, accomplishment, call it what you want. It's rarely directed at self, almost never directed at self.
Yeah. Well, and it also kind of goes to the idea that, like, let's take the metaphor of a car, right? You run your car, it might need air in the tires, you need an oil change, you need all of these things. But it's like saying, well, as long as I'm not been in a car accident, I'm not going to take it to the mechanic because I haven't I haven't broken down. Like the car's still running. It'll be fine. I'll figure it out later. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. You don't have to justify needing support and help. Like, y'all, my husband went to the psych ward like 3 months ago, and this was literally the conversation we had for 3 days straight. It was like, you don't have to do this to prove that you need help. So
that's a big point.
Oh, it is.
I think that's a huge point. And I think for a lot, even myself in the past and my peers, that point that you just made really is one of the main issues, is what does it take to recognize we need the help? And even for me, like, I hit a wall. And so when I realized that, and then I looked at my peers and a lot of my friends, other Spelman alum, and I'm like, every Black woman I know is actually moving in a similar way. And I don't want anybody else to have to hit this wall. Like, I don't want anyone else for the car to completely explode in the middle of the interstate. And they're like, oh, maybe something needs to happen. So that's what the discussion is. I want to, wave the flag. Let's talk about this. Let's be self-aware. Let's do some things. Let's get the oil change. Let's get, put air in the tires. Let's just park the car for a week and like do Uber.
Give
like,
the poor thing a break.
Let's just do some things so that, one, to even bring the awareness to it, because at least for me, I didn't know I was doing it. Like, that's the big issue. Is step one is self-awareness that you're doing anything that could be harmful to you. And if no one's talking about this and no one's highlighting it, you're just going about, and you don't really realize until it's until smoke is coming out of the hood. You're like, oh, we got a problem now.
Something's wrong. Yeah. We're getting some really awesome comments in the chat thread here. And I do just wanted to remind y'all, if you have questions for Joy, or if you want us to dive in deeper on a term, a topic, whatever, please feel free, ask questions in the chat thread. We've got a little over 15 minutes left in today's conversation. We did get a question from the chat that actually dovetails with the one I was going to ask you next anyway. This person had asked, how can society as a whole work towards dismantling the stereotypes and expectations that contribute to Superwoman syndrome, especially among Black women? All right, so let's talk about this in two sides, right? I want to talk about how society can help dismantle this, or how we as people that exist in the world can help. But also, let's start with the Black women themselves. What are 4 ways? Sorry, you don't have to do 4. Some ways that Black women can ditch that Superwoman syndrome of in and of themselves.
Right. So I'll start with that first, which are what are some things that women can do. So one is, like I said, self-reflection. So I won't get into my whole story, but essentially I didn't even really connect with the fact that I was having a problem until COVID hit, and I slowed down only slightly. And meaning slow down because I was at home, but still had work to do. But just that slight shift of not getting in the car, going, dropping the kids off, just that slowdown was enough for me to realize, I think I might not be okay. Like, I do get migraines every day. Like, so there was just this kind of like, I'm not okay. And so I started journaling, trying to start spending some time in nature. And that helped me kind of connect with how I was really feeling. Because a big part of this is disassociation. A big part of this is you are so disconnected from how you're really feeling. Like, your body knows, your subconscious knows, but your conscious mind and the way you're moving is unaware. So where that disconnect is, you got to do some things to reconnect, to even kind of get the message that your body may have been sending you the whole time, or your psyche. And you're like, oh, is that what that meant? That's why. Like, I was having
that low-lying dread. Is that, that now everybody has that? Oh, okay.
No, literally, it's like everyone's stomach is in a knot every single day when they walk into the office. It's like, so those are things that are already telling you, but you have to slow down just a wee bit and do some introspection about what does that really mean. So that's one thing, is just catch it, because you have to slow down to notice it. Then another big one is, like I said, it's self-reflection and doing less. And that's a big one, right? But just, even if it's just for like every day for 30 minutes, just sit and do nothing. Like, when I coach people, that is one of the hardest things for them to do. I'm not even saying meditate. I'm not like, just don't do anything for 30 minutes and don't be productive. Just be. That is huge. Like, people struggle with that. And
it's
so
hard.
You realize some of it is just kind of slowly, gradually increasing your capacity to not be producing. Then another thing is give stuff back to people. So part of this Superwoman piece is, right, you're at work, you're doing a great job. Someone says, oh, Joy's great. Why don't we give her that assignment too? Or this new team. Or you're like, yes, I'm doing great. And, oh, we want to promote her. We want to give her more money. And then at home, it's like, well, we want Joy to be the team mom of the group. And then, oh, would you like to be the board chair? Like, there's all, and it's all accolades. It's all honoring all of your work. But one of the things is to stop and give stuff back. Like, if you realize you're over indexed, I'm sorry, I can be on the board. I can't be the board chair. My child will show up at school every day. I cannot be classroom mom. hey, like stop, give it back to people, because people will take it back, but we have to make the choice to recognize I can't, don't want to, shouldn't, whatever, do this anymore. And so I'm going to give it back. So and at home, it's if you have kids, if you have a spouse and you are the primary when it comes to house stuff and even paying bills, thinking about give that back. If you have a significant other, if you have children that are of age, make them do chores. Like it's making other people in your life, both at work and in home, take on more responsibility so you can have less responsibility. And it's for you. Like you're recognizing it's for you, and the people who you're communicating it to, you're like, this is for me. So you're gonna do dinner every day and I won't. And so that's one thing. And then the last thing I would say is sleep and hydration, which some things are rocket science and some things aren't.
Yeah.
Getting enough sleep at night and drinking enough water, like those two things, we don't have to get into all the reasons why, but those are very restorative, and it can just help it's like that's like putting air in the tire and getting the oil change. Get enough sleep, turn everything off, no TV on, no phone by you, and then be intentional about staying hydrated. That, like, it's an easy fix, but it matters, and it really can be impactful in terms of some of those body things that happen when you're neglecting yourself.
Yeah. So we've got people in the chat here chiming in. Siobhan is a person after my own heart here, screaming boundaries in the chat. Also saying there was a time I wasn't even aware of my physiological responses to stress. This is huge, y'all. Like there's, what is it called? Like, how do you boil a frog? You put them in the water and then turn the water on, like turn the heat on. And so by the time the frog realizes it's in danger, it's already too late, right? So it really, like, that, being able to stop and take a breath, or even just take like 5 minutes where you are not scheduled to do anything, that's going to help you see, right, like really quickly.
Like how you're really feeling.
Yes. Yeah. Because if you're constantly go, the physical stuff is very easy to jettison. Like my like go-to is shower, sleep, food, or nature. When's the last time I had one of those 4? And if I can't remember any of them, then I need to do at least 2. And so, it really does go to the fact that you have to have multiple, options when it comes to protecting your space. Like the boundaries are important, but also knowing how to recharge yourself is hugely important too.
Right.
All right. So let's say we're looking at this not from the perspective of women of color. Let's say we are part of, a different demographic outside of that. How can we help to dismantle stereotypes and expectations that are keeping especially Black women trapped in this cycle?
I think one of the big things is, and it's hard, right? But it's getting folks that are not impacted by this. And this is going to be the same for all of the L's of society, like people who are not in the demographic, to recognize first their privilege, right? And this goes for any number of things, but hey, I'm privileged. Do I have space to give more to this group? And I think if you do it at that high level, so if you've got men in the workplace, just recognizing that when I'm not being nice, right? I say like, hey, I'm you and your wife. And then I just sit there for a minute and just let it process. I'm like, I'm you, completely you, and your whole wife. And then we just sit there and look at each other for a minute. And it's not an attack. It's just to like understand, like, could you do you and your wife's job? Like if you had to do you and your wife. So then, no, of course not. And they readily understand that. And so it's like, where's the grace? Where are some of the ways that, hey, if I'm expecting you to show up in the workplace exactly the way I do, okay, maybe I need to recognize, because I'm a fan of like, we're not all the same. I'm not a color is blind, gender. That's not true. It's not blind. Gender's not blind. Like these things matter.
Well, it's disingenuous to that person's experience.
And it's honest. And in the macro, it makes a difference. Like it
gives you context. It gives you, like it's not excusing things like this. It's trying to put them in a context and understand better what that person actually needs, like by listening to them, but also understanding, so, you know, like we talked about the intersectionalities, the different layers of hurdles or obstacles that people might have in their path, you know, understanding those things, and even just taking the time, the two to 5 seconds that you can, obviously, to just be like, wait, what do I know about this person? What might they actually need? Not what do I know about my coworker, not what else do they have on their plate. I'm talking like person. How is the person doing? Because if you start there, it can be a lot easier.
And I think some of the relationships that I have, like with people that are very different than me, right, that have different political views, gender, race, everything, and some of the most powerful dynamics about those relationships is that there's a relationship there, right? So if you have relationship, like genuine relationship, then you can have conversations about these things, and people are more able to hear things, to be even offended, but because there's a personal relationship there, there's the opportunity to really like transform like a person's perspective, and then that person in that demographic goes out and then they communicate with their peer group about like, hey, wait a minute, let me interrupt you. Like, I know we all over here think this, but I have a personal, like real relationship, not a token relationship, not a superficial, but a genuine relationship with a genuine person. And I'm here to tell you, people of this group, what we're saying isn't true. Like, or what we think about women or people in the LGBT, like it's not true. What I have found is that is some of the most transformational work, and it comes down to personal relationships. And people have to be open on both sides to have those relationships and to have the hard conversations within those relationships.
I like that. We did get a question in the chat. This person wanted to know, how can we encourage and support Black women in setting boundaries and prioritizing their own well-being? I think that's a really interesting question, because it obviously comes from a place of good intentions, but could we best walk that line between not infantilizing someone, not assuming that they can't do things, while also not assuming that they will do these things? You know, what ideally, if you could see that, what would it look like?
You know, it's funny. For me, I think it takes, and this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I think, frankly, it takes a Black woman to say to a Black woman, hey, girl.
Takes one to know one.
Let's talk about this. Like, because even in my work, a lot of it is, step one is getting my clients or prospective clients to see that they are suffering. Because I have this funny little thing I say. I'm like, sometimes Black women are suffering looks like other people's success.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at us, we're looking at us, and we're like, we're winning. And they're like, she's winning. And I'm like, girl, we are not winning. But like, there's work that has to be done from me to her first, because it's not always at the forefront. Even though you're having these physical issues and all these pains in your body and restless night and difficulty in your marriage, difficulty with your kids, it's still not at the forefront what's wrong. Like, so a lot of my work is literally just getting them to see what's wrong. So I think the challenge is you can't give people solutions to a problem that they don't know they have.
There it is. That's powerful. If we have more time, I want to sit with that one for a while. Okay, we've got about 5 minutes left. I want to make sure we take a little bit of time here to talk some more about Flawed Masterpiece. What should we know about it?
So Flawed Masterpiece is the business that I started when I started doing some inner work. So when I was this former Superwoman who had to kind of really confront what I had been doing my entire adult life and started doing some of the unraveling and some of the unlearning, I realized this is something I want to be able to offer to other women. So I got certified in mindset coaching. A lot of this is around mindset stuff, but it's also somatic. It's meditation, it's nature, it's kind of a whole, there is some trauma work, there's some shadow and inner child work. So I'm a person that has a trauma background. Again, a big part of my work is people who have that kind of background sometimes choose achievement as a coping mechanism. That is not something that is discussed a lot. I was one of those people, and I realized that is something that, if that's the issue, that's a really complex thing that has to be unraveled, because what you've been applauded for potentially is something you chose unconsciously because it's where you found your self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
And if you found your self-worth and achievement and you're achieving, it can be very difficult to relinquish that path, because then you have to go and turn around and confront, how did we get to this place? So a lot of the work that I do in Flawed Masterpiece is around that. Flawed, is an acronym, and this is a professional environment, so I won't say what the acronym is, but you can go look up Flawed Masterpiece and you can see what each of those letters mean. But it's a journey, right? It's about a healing journey, like a self-awareness journey. And it's raw, and it's, I'm a professional, I'm a lawyer of almost 20 years. So I realized there's a need to be raw and honest about things, and to really deal with issues, the dark issues, the shadow issues that people don't want to deal with, so that they can truly thrive. So that's what the business is around. I do coaching, I do speaking. I sell products that are supportive of the journey. So aromatherapy, yoga mats, meditation mats, sound bowls, and these are all things that I just kind of discovered, because a big part of this too is playfulness. I want to make sure that I say this for women in general that are professional, but especially I think Black women, sometimes we have to grow up really early, right? And we are not into playing and being silly and irreverent. So some of the things I sell in my store are like journals with cursing in them. And it's funny, it's silly, it's about self-expression. This is important. It's important to be a whole person that like lives fully engaged in the world. And so once you start unraveling some of this trauma, you have to replace it with something. Like, you have to be thoughtful about what you want your life to be once you realize some of these maladaptive things. So part of my business is around helping them see some of that dark stuff. Let's work on it. And now let's reinvent ourselves. Who do we want to be? What do we want to do? How do we want to show up in the world? So that's what I created, and I happen to still be practicing law, but I feel like this is the most important work that I could be doing, because it's something that I didn't see out there. I didn't see anybody talking about it. And I know the severity of how I was suffering. And I know that there are other people that are suffering at that same degree and may not see the path to start working on it. And so for me, I'm like, it is worth every inch of my time, money, energy to try to show other people that path.
Oh my gosh, I'm loving all of this. I'm wishing we had another 45 minutes to keep talking, especially when it comes to things like Black joy. I have big feelings about this. For somebody it doesn't really impact, I have big feelings. So I just want to say, Joy, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been wonderful to get to know you a little better and learn more about Flawed Masterpiece. I did grab a link to your main page. I shared that in the group chat as well. But I just want to say a huge thank you for sharing your time and expertise with us. This is absolutely wonderful.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. It's been a pleasure. And I love your hair.
Oh, thank you. I like yours too. All right, Hunter, I'm going to turn the stage back over to you so we stay on time. Take it away.